Everyone, a really warm welcome back to the channel. Well, in today's video I want to talk to you about a project I did during lockdown. Yes, sorry, it's taken me a long time to edit this video, and that is the subject of renovating the steel wheels on my caravan. So a little bit of background before we go and look at the footage. This is an Ariba, which means when you buy one of these things, if you're ordering it new from the factory, you are presented with an enormous list of options, and I mean multiple pages of the things. It's a very useful list because it has the item and it has the extra weight it adds, and it has the cost as well, which is eye-watering quite often, and that's both good and bad. So it's good because you can get exactly what you want. You don't have to carry around excess things. So I think ovens are an option, but I don't think many Ariba owners opt for them. Maybe it's only occasionally an option. Anyway, we don't tend to specify ovens in these things because you'd lose what little storage space you have in the lower kitchen cupboards. So you get this enormous list of options, and the bad side of that is that some things which are absolutely essential, like a spare wheel, are options. I mean, obviously these smaller ones are used for touring purposes, aren't they? I can understand not having a spare wheel if you're buying something for a seasonal pitch, like the big touring 820, but on something that's going to be on the road, yeah, I think a spare wheel is a sensible idea. Although I have had a couple of discussions with folks who say they just carry that Tyre gunge around, and they'd expect the breakdown people to come and rescue them, although that would mean loading the entire caravan up on a low loader and taking it to a garage, wouldn't it? And what happens if your wheel gets dented or ruined in the process of a puncture or a breakdown? Anyway, that is going off topic. So if you're buying from specifying from a factory, then you can specify whatever you want on this options list. Of course, if you're buying from a dealership who's already got the caravan in the UK and got it on the forecourt like this one was, then you have to go with whatever the dealership has chosen. So on this one, alloy wheels were not specified. I could have easily factory ordered, but that would have been an extra 3 or 4 months, which wasn't a major issue. But the major issue at the time, back 5 years ago, was there was all this talk in the media about the Brexit negotiations not going very well, and we were about to just suddenly drop out with no deal whatsoever, which would have put, by the time you allow for import taxes and all the rest of it, in the case of no deal, would have put about another £4,000, £5,000 on the cost of the caravan. And we couldn't deal with an extra £4,000 or £5,000 on this caravan. So it was steel wheels that were on there already. And I resolved at this point, and I talked to the dealership about it, and we just said, well, when it comes time to change the tyres, I will go with steels. However, it came time to change the tyres, and I started looking at alloys. Of course, Hymer makes some. There are plenty of aftermarket suppliers of these things, all in Germany. So again, there was the import taxes issue, which we didn't used to have. So I talked to the dealership, and the dealership tried to get the okay from Hymer, and Hymer said no, that they would not honour the warranty because the caravan would no longer be in the state that it left the factory in. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thanks very much, Hymer. Something to do with their regulations around TUV certification and making sure your trailer is not modified. So that was not very helpful. So I could have said, you know, what the hell, and just gone with some aftermarket alloys, worked out the profiles and the what's called the PCD, so the distance between the centres of the nuts and so on, and ordered some appropriately. But as part of the process of looking around, I started to see lots of people painting steels, and mostly for cars. Well, I don't think I've seen a trailer set painted at all, but mostly for old cars that they were modding. So I sort of swatted up on a few videos on YouTube, as you do, to try and teach yourself things. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose, I will give it a go. So the tyre man came, put the new tyres on. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to have the tyre man put new tyres on my newly painted wheels in case he completely ruined my surface. So I thought I'll work with the new tyres on and mask them off very carefully. So he jacked the caravan up, left it on the axle stands. It was about 7 or 10 days it was up on the axle stands. And in fact I was expecting the service engineer, so I timed it between Tyre man, well, I booked everybody at the right date, didn't I? So I booked the Tyre man, and then about 10 days later I had the caravan service man. So I had that 10-day period in the middle to get the painting done to a high quality and get everything dried off, and then it would be double checked by all the pros to make sure everything was good to go and we were just as roadworthy as we were before. So what I did as I was painting the wheels though is I didn't vlog it. You know, I was learning as I was going along, and so there was no way it was going to be an instructional video. But what I'll do now is talk you through from today what I did back then and show you all the images and the stuff that worked well. Don't think anything went wrong, actually, amazingly. It all worked. And then I'll show you what the wheels look like today. So let us get back in time to back in a pandemic lockdown. So here's the before shot, looking a bit sad really, aren't they? Obviously a bit mucky as well, but there's quite a bit of rust forming around all of the edges. So particularly around the hole pattern, around the centre of the wheel. And not just the wheel, but the Alco centre cap is also looking a bit sad. So that really needed sorting out too. First job after the wheels were off was scrub. Now, obviously, I wash the wheels every time I wash the caravan, but only the fronts, not the backs, not the insides. And so it was a case of getting 6 years almost of muck and all the rest of it off since it left the factory. And of course, we've driven it all the way up through the Highlands, up into Skye and so on, and it's gone down all the way to Cornwall a couple of times as well. Now, none of this was a quick job. I took my time because, you know, it's the first time I'd done something like this. So I didn't want to rush it and muck it up because this is a job I wanted to do once. So it had to be done well, and I didn't want to have to do it again until at least the next set of tyres, if not longer. The caravan had been safely balanced on axle stands, so that gave me time to attend to it, as I said, over about a week or 10 days or so. I forget precisely how long. But you're going to see all the steps that I went through in this video. Anyway, as they say, perfect preparation prevents, we'll miss 1p, I'll just say poor performance. So next step was getting all that rust off. I taped over the tyre because, as I said in the introduction, this is a new one on here. I'd let a bit of air out so I could try and get the tape properly under the rim, but not so much that there was any danger of the tyre being unseated or made the wheel difficult to move and handle and so on. And then Mike set to work with his wire wheel attached to his drill. And it quickly became fairly apparent that the wire wheel's a bit too big to get into all the nooks and the crannies of this particular set of wheels. And I think a lot of steels are similar. So out came the air compressor toys. And then last off, I finished the inside edges of each hole the old-fashioned manual way with a bit of glass paper, and it's a good rub down. And then, of course, Mr. Perfectionist turned up again with his Scotch Brite pad, and that smoothed everything back off, so I had a nice even finish to start with. And then it was a case again of clean to make sure I got all the dust and everything that had been generated from the sanding down off. and it was cleaning with IPA, isopropyl alcohol, making sure there was no grease or anything on the initial wheel. And then I left them overnight to ensure they were completely dry and there was no water in there. The IPA would have evaporated quickly, but I wanted to make sure everything was rested. So everything looked great on the surface, but every minute bit of rust could have restarted a bubble under the new paint. And of course I didn't want that happening in a year or so. And I was still concerned about that seam. Can you see there's a seam between the inner and the outer parts of the wheel? So you can just see that around the outside of the hole, I'm not sure if it's a seam or it's a very tight fold. Actually, it looks more like a fold from the inside surface of the wheel. So there are a few bits of suspicious looking, sort of almost semi-rusty, but not even the glass paper could get into the inside of that seam. So the next step was a rust converter. So I started off thinking I'd just paint any suspicious or vulnerable bits, and then I thought, well, blow it, and I put plenty on to make sure I had it nicely covered on the surface. Make sure it was nice and smooth, obviously, because anything that was not smooth at this point was going to upset the paint layers that went on the top. So that had to be topped up, I think just once more according to the instructions. And any rusty bits were supposed to go a sort of black-green colour, but actually I got none of those, I think, although the wheel did look a bit purple in a few places. But nevertheless, once I was finished, it did look very clean and smooth, if somewhat patchy in colour, but it did look like it was a nice smooth surface, and we got rid of all the rust. The next step was masking off that brand new tyre to protect it, and then gradually building up layers of primer. I put some links in the description to the actual paint system that I used. One thing I was worried about was if I mixed paints from different brands, potentially there would be a chemical reaction and there might be blistering in the paint, or them not chemically bonding to each other. So I made sure that I used primer and paint and lacquer that were from the same range, that were designed to work together. As you can imagine, it was a slow, gradual process, and I was very lucky with that mid-spring weather, so late March, early April. And I left the wheels inside to harden off for a day or two. Luckily, we've got this reasonably warm outbuilding at the end of the garden, because I have to tell you, these new tyres absolutely stank. You saw a minute ago that I'd left them all freshly washed and cleaned and sanded and so on. I'd left them overnight in my office to dry thoroughly, and it took me 2 or 3 days to get rid of the stench. I can't tell you how bad it was. It was absolutely awful. So if you're doing something like this, don't expect to leave them in the kitchen. If we had smell-o-vision, then you'd be shouting in disgust by this point. So once I was absolutely sure the primer was rock solid, it was at least overnight. It may have been a second night, depending on, I can't remember how much work I actually had to do in between the two. I took some very fine wire wool to it very gently, just to ensure a smooth but keyed surface. Made sure there were no sort of bubbles of paint or anything. There weren't particularly, but I wanted to go over it because, you know, wanted to do it once, wanted to do it well. And then blew that all off and then cleaned again with IPA to make sure that dust was gone and there was no residue. And then it was a moment of truth. The first bit of black, I managed to contain my eagerness to see what it would look like. And again, slowly built up the colour. So spray a little bit smoothly in passes across the surface, and then back again in a different direction, and then dry again, and then back again, and dry again, and back again. So building it up to give a nice even coverage. And remember, these rattle cans need a really good shake to make sure the paint's really well mixed inside and it comes out smoothly. And then every time I finished a pass, I turned the can upside down and squirted it to clear out the nozzle, so there would be no splatters when I restarted it the next time. But of course, every time I started it off the tyre itself, so there was no splatter mark, and then brought it across, moving smoothly and evenly as I went. So a few coats later, and then overnight again, and thoroughly dry, and we were ready for lacquer. I was a bit concerned at this point there might be a bit of a seal forming between the rim of the steel itself and the tape, so I went round with a stick pushing the the tape down before the lacquer went on, just to check that the black was okay at that level, because I didn't want any of the silver from the wheel showing through between the wheel and the tyre. And then gradually again, slowly the lacquer went on. This was much harder to get level, and on one of the wheels I can see a very tiny tide mark in the finish. If I look really closely, I don't think anybody else would probably spot it was there, but if I look at it, I know where it is, because it's on one of the centre ridge parts. So I probably should have been even slower on this layer, but it seemed to come out, the lacquer much thicker and much bigger globs. Globs, is that even a word? Anyway, it came out much more vigorously, so probably the can should have been further away. And then immediately after the last layer was on, and whilst the lacquer was still wet, I peeled the masking tape, because I'd always been told to take masking tape off while the paint is still wet. And I used a tiny craft knife, more as a pushing tool than a knife, but it allowed really nice fine control of the paint tape meeting point. And of course, getting the tape off the valve was the trickiest bit without touching anything else around it, but just about managed it. Then after, I think, 2 nights worth of drying, the wheels went back on the caravan. And by this point it was also clear that my suspicions around the motor mover having been fitted incorrectly were, I was right. The mover fitting person was wrong. It was just completely obviously not correctly aligned as the manual said it should be. So I knew at that point I'd have to refit it properly, but the wheel had to go back on because the caravan serviceman was due in the morning. And so I will tell you about the mover and fixing the mover and getting it aligned properly where it should have been in another video. Whilst I've been busy putting the wheel back on, Mike was polishing the Alco centre caps using various grades of Scotch-Brite pads. And once they were back to shiny, I decided to give them a couple of coats of lacquer to help them stay that way. And then I decided the easiest way to do that was just using a couple of old branches as holders. So once all of that was hardened off and the centre caps were back on, it was just a case of choosing some wheel nut covers, because the tyre fitting guy had completely mashed all of my original ones. I did try plain black, but it wasn't looking very interesting actually, but these chrome ones look great, especially against the Alco centre cap. And then of course everything had to have a coat of tyre shine. And there we are. So there we go, 1 year on. I hope it was interesting watching me do that. As I said, that was all the first time I tried anything. There was no rehearsal there. That was all completely straight off. I was really worried that it was going to look absolutely awful and amateurish and I was going to get paint runs everywhere. But actually, I think it worked out really, really well. I did, really try and take it very carefully and very slowly. So I was getting the paint layers to absolutely harden and I didn't want to rush it. So I went through it very slowly because who wants their wheels to look terrible? Anyway, that was just swatting up on videos from YouTube and reading stuff on forums and so on. So I hope it was useful following me through. I did promise you I would show you what they look like a year later. And here we go. I've just washed them off, but I have dried them. So that is the finish as it is now. There's a little bit of flaking of lacquer on the inside edge of one or two of the holes, which is where the bar for the Nemesis wheel lock goes through, because it's an incredibly tight fit. But the black paint itself is still fine. It looks unblemished, so I'm happy with that. It's just the lacquer that seems to be peeling slightly, so I need to keep a close eye on that. And of course, there's a bit of a nick on the edge where the wheel lock touches it a little bit and it's just blemished the surface slightly, and that's the same case for this wheel nut cover as well, where the chrome coating on the top of the black is peeling off. But those are cheap and I've got 10 or 15 spares, so that's easy to sort out. And I am amazingly happy with them. I think they look thousands of times better than I thought they would do when I first started out on this process trying to paint the wheels and improve them. And actually, I think, dare I say it, I think they look better than alloys would have done, because the alloys would have been silver or silver and black mix. But actually jet black, and especially when I've got tyre polish, tyre shine, what's it called? Tyre shine on the tyres. It looks amazing next to the white of the Caravan. It's just really sort of badass contrast, and I think it looks brilliant. And of course now it tones in with the black roof bars that I've got on the van and the black bike rack and so on. So it looks really great. I think it suits the Caravan very nicely. And of course I've preserved all the benefits of steels, which is the strength of them. So great all round, really happy with them. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope it was useful. I hope it was interesting. If you've got steel wheels, I hope it maybe gave you some inspiration to have a go. As I said, I'm no expert. This is me doing it very much for the first time. My advice would be take your time, do it slowly, do it carefully. If you can, do it in the warmer weather. So not the peak of summer where it's absolutely roasting, but dry and reasonably warm, so I guess 12 or 15 degrees, something like that, whatever the paint indicates is the best temperature. I was doing it a little early in the year, I think it was March, April time, so I was lucky that we had a lovely dry week, but I did have pollen to contend with when I was painting outside. Of course, if you've got a big garage or something and you can keep the door open and get a good flow through of air, or wear a proper painting mask, then you'll be okay. But I prefer to spray it outside, and then I could be upwind of the paint overspray. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you like the work, do give us a thumbs up, drop us a comment below, let me know what you think. And of course, if you know anybody that you think would benefit from this, lots of Continental caravans come with steel wheels on them, please do send them the link, forward it on, recommend it if you can. That would be great, because I would love my experiment to be able to help somebody else. Anyway, thanks for watching, catch you in the next one, and bye for now. See ya.